Veronica Vale was the kind of woman whose name turned heads and silenced rooms, a dazzling socialite by day, a ruthless criminal mastermind by night, and the last person anyone expected to keep a garden full of graves. In the heart of the city, beneath the glittering lights and constant hum of nightlife, Veronica Vale was a name that seemed to shimmer with untouchable prestige. To the public, she was elegance personified, her image splashed across magazine covers, her presence a guarantee of sophistication at every charity gala. She moved with the grace of someone who belonged among the elite, her evenings spent raising millions for children's hospitals, her afternoons captured by society photographers as she stepped out of designer boutiques. Her smile seemed to radiate warmth. Her words, carefully chosen to inspire admiration. People saw a woman of influence and compassion, someone who gave back to the community in ways most could only dream of. What they didn't know was that the very hands that signed generous donation checks were the same hands that orchestrated ruthless deals in the shadows. By night, Veronica's charm transformed into something far more dangerous. Hidden behind the walls of luxury penthouses and exclusive nightclubs, she commanded an empire built on theft, smuggling, and manipulation. Artwork stolen from private collections moved through her network like whispers, disappearing into black market vaults. Weapons crossed borders disguised as antique shipments, their true destination known only to her most trusted associates. Her rise to power had been as calculated as it was ruthless. She understood people's weaknesses better than they understood themselves, exploiting greed, fear, and ambition with surgical precision. No one in her organization dared to question her authority, and those who tried soon became names that quietly vanished from conversation. She kept her enemies close enough to watch and her allies closer still, ensuring loyalty through a mixture of fear and lavish rewards. In public, Veronica cultivated the perfect mask, weaving a life so convincing that even the sharpest journalists failed to pierce it. She was photographed laughing with mayors, shaking hands with police chiefs, and embracing celebrities, each image another layer of protection. The thought that she could be a criminal mastermind never crossed the minds of those who toasted champagne beside her. But her power was built on fragile foundations, and she knew it. Every empire has cracks, however small, and one overlooked detail can be enough to bring the walls crashing down. Veronica believed she was untouchable, yet somewhere in the shadows, the first thread in her carefully woven web had already begun to unravel. It was only a matter of time before the life she had built so perfectly would be exposed for what it truly was, a throne of glass standing over a pit of secrets. It began with the sudden absence of Marcus DeLuca, a man who had been more than just an accountant to Veronica Vale's empire. Marcus was meticulous, cautious to the point of paranoia, and fiercely private about the figures he managed. He had overseen the financial maze that kept her criminal dealings invisible, ensuring money flowed cleanly from illegal trades into legitimate fronts. For years, he had been reliable to the last decimal, the type of man who balanced books with the same precision surgeons use with a scalpel. Which is why his disappearance felt like more than just a personal tragedy. It was a crack in the foundation of her entire operation. One rainy afternoon, Marcus's black sedan was found abandoned near a stretch of riverbank known for its silence. The driver's door was left open, the keys dangling from the ignition as if he had stepped out for a moment and never returned. His wallet and phone were still inside, untouched. Police at first leaned toward suicide or accidental drowning, but there were no footprints in the mud, no signs of struggle, and no body. The disappearance felt staged, but for what reason, no one could yet say. 2 days later, a small pawn shop owner in the industrial district reported something unusual. A man in a hooded jacket had sold him a locked briefcase for cash, refusing to answer questions about its contents. The owner, too curious to resist, pried it open and was stunned by what he found: bundles of documents covered in tight, neat handwriting, numbers and symbols forming a code he didn't understand. There were also photographs, receipts, and a typed list of names, some neatly crossed out in dark red ink. The pawn shop owner, unsettled, turned the briefcase over to authorities. Within hours, investigators realized the ledgers detailed hidden offshore accounts tied to shell corporations that matched Veronica's legitimate businesses. The names in the briefcase were not random. They belonged to people who had vanished over the past 10 years: business partners, rival dealers, even former employees. Each name was paired with a date, suggesting the ledger was not merely financial but also a record of eliminations. Detectives who had once dismissed Veronica as a harmless socialite began to revisit cold cases with a new lens. The smiling woman in evening gowns no longer looked like a philanthropist. She looked like the center of a web, and Marcus DeLuca's disappearance was the first strand to be pulled loose. The raid began just before sunrise, when the city was still wrapped in fog and the streets were nearly empty. A convoy of unmarked vehicles wound its way to the cliffside estate that Veronica Vale called home. From the outside, the mansion was an architectural masterpiece: polished marble columns, sweeping balconies, and manicured gardens that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. But behind the ornate facade, detectives believed lay the truth that could shatter her empire. Officers moved quickly, their boots echoing across the stone driveway as they forced the heavy iron gates open. The front doors, carved from rare oak, gave way to a grand foyer filled with glittering chandeliers and oil paintings worth small fortunes. Every surface gleamed, every detail arranged to project wealth and refinement. Yet the deeper they moved inside, the more they saw signs of something carefully hidden beneath the surface. Behind a panel disguised as part of a bookcase, they found a narrow staircase leading to a concealed basement. The walls here were thick and soundproof, the air cool and dry. Row upon row of steel shelves held boxes filled with forged passports, counterfeit currency, and photographs of politicians, judges, and business leaders in compromising situations. These were more than trophies, they were tools of control. Each image and document represented leverage, enough to silence even the most determined adversary. In the wine cellar, they uncovered something even more damning. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary storage room filled with dusty bottles and oak barrels. But behind a false wall lay rows of filing cabinets, each locked and meticulously labeled. Inside were thousands of documents recording illegal shipments, payoffs, bribes, and coded instructions for operations spanning 15 years. Every transaction was documented with dates, amounts, and names, proof that her network reached deeper than anyone had imagined. While the evidence was overwhelming, something about its organization was chilling. This wasn't chaos. It was methodical, as if Veronica had built a criminal empire with the same precision as a corporate giant. The detectives knew they had enough to indict her for multiple charges, yet one question lingered: where were the missing people tied to her records? The files told the story of her crimes, but the truth about her victims was still buried somewhere out of sight. That answer, they feared, would be far worse than anything they had found so far. The discovery came almost by accident. While officers cataloged the contents of Veronica Vale's mansion, a groundskeeper quietly approached one of the detectives. He was an older man, his hands worn from years of tending the sprawling estate. In a low voice, he mentioned a part of the property he had never been allowed to enter: a secluded walled garden at the farthest edge of the grounds. Veronica herself kept the only key, and even the landscaping crew had been ordered to stay away. The garden was surrounded by high stone walls, hidden from view by towering cypress trees. When the gates were forced open, the scene inside was strangely beautiful and unnervingly precise. Exotic flowers bloomed in perfectly symmetrical rows, their petals vivid against the dark, rich soil. Marble statues of angels and saints stood watch in the corners, their white surfaces gleaming in the morning light. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a private sanctuary, but as investigators moved deeper inside, their eyes caught on irregular patches of disturbed earth between the rose bushes. Shovels bit into the ground, turning up the scent of soil that had been recently disturbed. Within minutes, bones emerged. Some were small and fragile, others heavier and unmistakably human. Each grave seemed deliberate, the remains positioned carefully as though part of a ritual. Beside each body lay a personal object, an item that must have once belonged to the victim. A gold watch, a single pearl earring, a silver cufflink. These trinkets were partially buried, but placed in a way that suggested they were meant to be found by anyone who dared to dig. Forensic teams worked in silence, their gloved hands sifting through the earth. The number of graves grew as the day went on. By nightfall, they had uncovered at least a dozen. Many of the jewelry pieces matched descriptions from missing persons cases that had haunted the city for years. The connection to Veronica's ledger was undeniable. Each grave corresponded to a name and date written in her precise, looping handwriting. The garden was no accident of beauty, it was a carefully tended graveyard. Veronica Vale had created her own private monument to the people who had crossed her or outlived their usefulness. Every rosebush and every statue masked a story of betrayal, silence forever beneath the soil. What had once seemed like an eccentric piece of luxury landscaping was revealed to be her most chilling secret of all. In the weeks that followed the discovery of the graves, the case against Veronica Vale seemed airtight. The ledgers, the blackmail files, the hidden passports, and now the bodies, each piece built a narrative of a woman who had risen to power through manipulation, fear, and murder. She was moved to a high-security detention center to await trial, her glamorous image replaced by the stark reality of prison walls. Yet for all the evidence piled against her, there was a lingering unease among the investigators. It felt too easy, as if they had uncovered what she had wanted them to find. That suspicion grew when a team was assigned to comb through every item taken from her mansion. In a library overflowing with rare books, one detective noticed a heavy leather-bound volume that seemed out of place. Its pages had been cut and hollowed to form a secret compartment. Inside lay a small encrypted hard drive, no bigger than a deck of cards. It was quickly sent to digital forensics, where specialists worked around the clock to crack its code. When the files finally opened, the contents sent a shockwave through the investigation. The drive contained a list of active operatives still loyal to Veronica, each embedded in key positions across the city banks, shipping companies, government offices, and even within law enforcement itself. They weren't just keeping her network alive, they were expanding it. Instructions outlined a seamless transfer of leadership to a hidden second in command, ensuring the empire would thrive despite her imprisonment. The most disturbing file was saved under a single word: crown. It contained a detailed blueprint for taking control of rival criminal organizations, dismantling competitors through targeted arrests, and acquiring their assets under the guise of legitimate business. Dates had already been assigned. Several phases were already in progress, their execution timed to coincide with the chaos surrounding her trial. When confronted with this discovery, Veronica showed no reaction. In court, she listened to testimony with a calm, detached expression, as though the outcome was irrelevant. She knew the city had only cut off one head of the serpent, and the rest would keep moving without her. The authorities had caged the killer queen, but her influence had already seeped into the city's veins. Even behind bars, her empire was not dying, it was evolving, waiting for the day when the crown could be reclaimed.